Welcome to my channel. The parking lot of Blackstone Luxury Motors was filled with million-dollar supercars. Ferraris. Lamborghinis. Bugattis. Then, a rusty, faded 1962 Ferrari rolled slowly through the front gate. People stopped and stared. Some customers laughed. One salesman whispered, "Who would bring that junk here?" Behind the wheel sat Ethan Carter, a hard-working single father and small-town mechanic. Beside him was his 10-year-old son, Noah. Noah smiled nervously. "Dad, maybe we should leave." Ethan gently shook his head. "We're here for one reason. We finish what Grandpa started." As they parked, the dealership CEO, Victoria Hayes, walked outside with several executives. She looked at the rusty Ferrari and smirked. "Sir, our showroom is for luxury vehicles, not scrap metal." The employees laughed. Victoria folded her arms. "Unless you're here to sell it for parts, I suggest you take it somewhere else." Ethan remained calm. "I'm not here to sell it. I'm looking for someone who understands its history." Victoria laughed. "History? That car hasn't been valuable in decades." Noah quietly looked down. Ethan gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's okay." He slowly opened the hood. The old engine looked worn, covered in dust and oil. Victoria barely glanced at it. "I've seen enough." But just as she turned away, an elderly man walking through the showroom suddenly froze. His eyes widened. His hands began to tremble. He whispered, "No. That can't be." He slowly stepped closer to the engine, staring at one small handwritten signature hidden beneath years of grease. The color drained from his face. "That's Enzo Ferrari's original signature." The entire showroom fell silent. The showroom fell completely silent. Every employee gathered around the old Ferrari. The elderly man carefully wiped away decades of grease with a soft cloth. Slowly, elegant handwritten letters appeared on the engine block. Enzo Ferrari. His hands trembled. "I worked at Ferrari's restoration division for 28 years. I've only seen this signature twice." Victoria frowned. "You're telling me that's authentic?" The old man nodded. "If I'm right, this engine was personally inspected by Enzo Ferrari before it left the factory." The room erupted into whispers. Victoria stepped closer. How did a small-town mechanic end up with something like this? Ethan looked at the old car. "It belonged to my grandfather. He worked as a mechanic in Europe during the 1960s. He never spoke much about those years. He only told me one thing. Never sell this car until someone understands what it really is." The elderly expert examined the engine more closely. Then he noticed something unusual. There should be a serial plate, but it's missing. Victoria smirked. "So the story falls apart. It's probably fake." Ethan calmly reached into the glove compartment. He removed a small leather notebook. "This is all my grandfather left me." Inside were faded photographs, old workshop notes, and a yellow envelope sealed for more than 50 years. Noah looked surprised. "Dad, you never opened it?" Ethan smiled. "Grandpa said to wait for the right day. I think today is that day." With everyone watching, Ethan carefully broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter. The elderly expert began reading aloud. "To the future owner of this Ferrari. If you're reading this, you've discovered one of the rarest engines we ever built. Guard it carefully. It represents a dream that almost disappeared forever." At the bottom of the page was a familiar signature. Enzo Ferrari. Victoria's confident smile disappeared. She whispered, "This can't be real." Just then, another document slipped from the envelope. It was an original Ferrari factory certificate with an engine number that matched the car exactly. The elderly expert looked at Victoria. This isn't just an old Ferrari. It may be one of the most historically important Ferraris ever discovered. At that exact moment, a black helicopter landed outside the dealership. A man in an Italian suit stepped out. He introduced himself with just one sentence. "I'm here on behalf of Ferrari. And we've been searching for this car for over 30 years. Everyone rushed outside. The helicopter landed in the dealership parking lot. Its door opened. A distinguished man in a dark Italian suit stepped out. He introduced himself. "My name is Lorenzo Bianchi. I represent Ferrari's Heritage Division." The crowd immediately fell silent.
Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Enjoy the video.
Lorenzo walked straight to the old Ferrari. Without saying a word, he slowly ran his hand across the dusty hood. He smiled. "We've been searching for this car for more than 30 years. Victoria looked stunned. "You mean Ferrari actually lost track of it?" Lorenzo nodded. "Not just the car. The engine. It was one of Enzo Ferrari's personal experimental projects." He opened a leather briefcase and removed several old black and white photographs. One photo showed Enzo Ferrari standing beside the very same car. Another showed Ethan's grandfather shaking hands with him inside the Ferrari factory. Ethan's eyes filled with emotion. "My grandfather. He really worked with Enzo Ferrari." Lorenzo smiled. He wasn't just a mechanic. He helped solve a serious engine problem that delayed one of Ferrari's most important projects. The entire dealership fell silent. Victoria slowly looked at Ethan. "I laughed at your car. But I had no idea." Ethan replied calmly. "My grandfather never cared about fame. He believed good work speaks for itself." Lorenzo nodded with respect. That's exactly why Enzo trusted him. The heritage team began inspecting the engine. After nearly an hour, one engineer called out. "Everything matches the original factory records. The casting numbers. The machining marks. Even the handwritten measurements." Lorenzo smiled proudly. "There is no doubt. This is the authentic prototype engine." Just then, another surprise appeared. One of the engineers noticed a small brass compartment hidden beneath the intake manifold. It had never been opened. Everyone gathered around as Lorenzo carefully unlocked it. Inside was a tiny velvet pouch. And an old folded letter. Lorenzo carefully unfolded the paper. His face turned pale. He looked at Ethan and whispered. "If this letter says what I think it says, your family's Ferrari isn't just historically important. It could become the most valuable Ferrari prototype ever discovered." The room fell completely silent. The entire showroom was silent. Lorenzo carefully unfolded the faded letter. Its paper had turned yellow with age. At the bottom, there was no mistaking the signature. Enzo Ferrari. Lorenzo began reading aloud. "To my friend, Samuel Carter. If this engine ever reaches the future, it belongs to the man who protected it, not to Ferrari. You preserved a dream when others wanted to destroy it. Keep it with honor." Tears filled Ethan's eyes. Samuel Carter. My grandfather. Victoria stood frozen. She whispered. "I mocked the very car that Enzo Ferrari personally entrusted to your family." Ethan quietly nodded. "My grandfather never spoke about recognition. He always said that respect is worth more than money." Just then, Lorenzo opened the velvet pouch. Inside was a small gold key. Attached to it was a metal tag engraved with the words, "Prototype Vault, Maranello." Everyone exchanged confused looks. Lorenzo smiled. "I've heard stories about this. But I never believed it actually existed. Victoria asked. What does the key open? Lorenzo replied. A private Ferrari archive. It contains the original records of experimental cars built under Enzo Ferrari himself. A week later, Ethan, Noah, Victoria, and Lorenzo traveled to Italy. Deep beneath Ferrari's historic archives, they reached an old steel vault. The golden key fit perfectly. The heavy door slowly opened. Inside were shelves filled with blueprints, journals, and prototype parts that had remained untouched for decades. Then Lorenzo found a leather folder labeled Project Phoenix. He carefully opened it. The first page showed Ethan's rusty Ferrari. The second page listed one name as the lead development mechanic. Samuel Carter. Victoria covered her mouth in disbelief. He wasn't just a mechanic. He helped create this project. Lorenzo turned to the final page. His expression suddenly changed. He looked directly at Ethan. There was supposed to be a second prototype. But according to these records, it disappeared on the very same day as your grandfather. If that second car still exists, it could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Everyone stared at the documents in shock. The search for one forgotten Ferrari had just become the search for two. The secret archive remained silent. Everyone stared at the final page of Project Phoenix. Lorenzo carefully closed the folder. If these records are accurate, the second prototype is still out there. And no one has seen it for over 60 years. Ethan looked at an old map tucked inside the file. Red markings circled an abandoned workshop on the outskirts of Maranello. Samuel Carter had written one sentence beside it. If anything happens to me, protect the second car. Lorenzo looked at Ethan. I think your grandfather hid it. The next morning, a small team traveled to the abandoned workshop. The building was falling apart. Broken windows. Rusted doors. Dust covered everything. Victoria looked around. It doesn't look like anyone has been here for decades. Ethan smiled. That's exactly why it survived. Inside the workshop, they searched for hours. Nothing. Just old tools and empty shelves. Then Noah noticed something strange. Dad! The floor sounds different here. Ethan tapped the concrete with a wrench. One section echoed. Hollow. Together, they moved an old workbench aside. Hidden beneath it was a heavy steel hatch. Lorenzo slowly unlocked it with the golden key. The hatch opened with a loud creak. A staircase led underground. At the bottom, a massive room appeared. Covered by a gray canvas was the outline of a car. Everyone held their breath. Ethan carefully pulled away the cover. The room fell silent. There it was. The missing Project Phoenix prototype number 2. Unlike Ethan's rusty Ferrari, this one had never been driven. Its deep red paint still gleamed under the lights. Lorenzo whispered. Incredible. It's completely untouched. As engineers inspected the car, one of them suddenly shouted. Mr. Bianchi. You need to see this. Inside the glove compartment was another sealed envelope. Across the front were the words. For Samuel Carter's family only. Ethan carefully opened it. Inside was a handwritten note from Enzo Ferrari. If my family ever loses faith in this project, your family will become its guardian. Attached to the letter was a legal ownership certificate. It transferred the second prototype to Samuel Carter and his descendants. Victoria stared at the document in disbelief. Ethan. Your family doesn't just own one historic Ferrari. You legally own both prototypes. Lorenzo smiled. You've just become the caretaker of two of the rarest Ferraris in history. Just then, his phone rang. He answered. His face turned pale. He slowly looked at Ethan. Word has leaked. Collectors from around the world are already on their way. And one billionaire has just offered $500 million for the two cars. The underground vault fell silent. Everyone looked at Lorenzo after hearing the offer. $500 million. Victoria whispered. That's one of the largest offers ever made for classic cars. Ethan looked at the two Ferraris. Then quietly closed the ownership documents. I'm not selling. The room went silent. One collector stepped forward. You could become one of the richest men in the world. Ethan smiled. My grandfather protected these cars for 60 years. He didn't do it for money. He did it because they were part of history. I'm not going to break that promise. Lorenzo nodded with respect. I believe Enzo Ferrari would have made the same choice. 6 months later. Both prototypes were carefully restored without changing their original design. They were displayed in a special exhibition celebrating automotive history. Thousands of visitors traveled from around the world. Beside the cars stood a bronze plaque that read, dedicated to Samuel Carter, whose honesty preserved a dream for future generations. Ethan and Noah stood quietly watching families admire the cars. Noah smiled. Grandpa would have loved this. Ethan nodded. He never wanted fame. He only wanted people to respect the work. Victoria walked over carrying a small wooden box. I have something for you. Inside was a gold badge engraved with the words, Honorary Heritage Ambassador. She smiled. You reminded us that the greatest treasures aren't always hidden in museums. Sometimes they're hidden in ordinary garages. Ethan accepted it with gratitude. Thank you. 1 year later. Ethan returned home to his small garage. He still repaired ordinary family cars. He still charged fair prices. He still treated every customer with kindness. Nothing about him had changed. The only difference was that visitors from all over the world now came to meet the humble mechanic whose family had protected two priceless Ferraris. One afternoon, a young boy looked at the rusty tools hanging on the wall and asked, Mr. Carter, what's the most valuable thing in this garage? Ethan smiled. It isn't the Ferraris. The boy looked confused. Then what is it? Ethan gently placed his grandfather's old wrench on the workbench. This. The boy asked. Why? Because it reminds me that skill, honesty, and hard work are worth more than any amount of money. As the sun set, Ethan and Noah drove away in the same restored Ferrari that had once been mocked as a rusty old car. The CEO who had laughed at it stood outside the garage and watched with a smile. She finally understood the lesson that changed her life. Never judge a person by what they drive, because the greatest stories are often hidden beneath a little rust.